What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have JoJo Diaz, 32 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw, taking on William Zepeda, 26 wins and 0 losses. This fight is taking place on October 29th in Indio, California. And on this same day, there's going to be Vasily Lomachenko versus Jermaine Ortiz, aka the Technician. Now, we know about the Matrix, we know the Technician. This fight between JoJo Diaz and William Zepeda is likely going to be intense, constant action. I mean, let me just get that one out there. But this is a very, interesting matchup. It's a golden boy fight, and JoJo Diaz, former 130-pound IBF champion. I mean, till this day, his only 2 losses are via decision to Gary Russell Jr., and this is like 2018 prime Gary Russell Jr., and then most recently in his latest fight, he lost a unanimous decision to Devin Haney. So think about that. JoJo Diaz's only 2 losses, Gary Russell Jr. and Devin Haney. And in this fight against William Zepeda is actually the betting favorite over JoJo Diaz. But it's not like JoJo Diaz hasn't won after being an underdog before. He was a betting underdog when he took on Tevin Farmer, challenging for Tevin Farmer's 130-pound title and beating Tevin Farmer via unanimous decision. That's how JoJo Diaz became the champ. And granted, Tevin Farmer hurt his hand in the first round of that fight. He hurt his left hand. So this was, southpaw versus southpaw, as is JoJo Diaz versus William Zepeda, southpaw versus southpaw. But here, William Zepeda is the one who's kind of he's the hot name in this fight. Yes, JoJo Diaz, because of his reputation, because of his resume, is still the A-side fighter. But this is almost set up to be a very competitive fight, but with the opportunity that the young eats the old, even though the old in this case is still only 29 years old. Think about that. JoJo Diaz is still 29. So like a few years ago, he was, one of those, budding prospect names on Golden Boy, fighting on a lot of significant undercards, just kind of building a name, carrying some pop too. I don't think JoJo Diaz hit super hard at 135, but when he was at featherweight, from the beginning of his career up until the loss to Gary Russell Jr., JoJo Diaz was an undefeated prospect, working his way up, kind of getting one of those like lesser belts. I think he was like the NABF featherweight title holder, which is the WBC issues the NABF title. So he held on to that for a few defenses, and then he fought Gary Russell Jr., who, I always say this, I look at Gary Russell Jr. as, at least once upon a time, and not too long ago, having the fastest hands in the sport pound for pound. Like Gary Russell Jr. has electric hand speed that you have to see to believe. So Gary Russell Jr. pretty much handled JoJo Diaz. He was just getting off first, moving around the ring, just winning the exchanges, blazing hand speed, not to mention the, the boxing IQ, the boxing acumen. So, Gary Russell Jr. to me had like top 10 pound for pound talent. He didn't have enough fight over fight consistency to really be a top 10 pound for pounder, but I felt like he always had the tools. And that marked the first loss for JoJo Diaz. And for a long time, that was his only loss. So after losing to Gary Russell Jr., JoJo Diaz went to 130, won his next few fights, and then fought Tevin Farmer for Tevin Farmer's belt. And this is when Tevin Farmer on DAZN was like fighting a few times a year. Like Tevin Farmer for a while was like arguably the most featured American fighter on the DAZN platform, along with maybe Demetrius Andrade. But Tevin Farmer was fighting super consistently, and he was just having one successful title defense after another until he ran into JoJo Diaz. And JoJo Diaz just outworked him. Like he was just beating him up with combinations, getting off first. Again, Tevin Farmer had a hand issue, but take nothing away from the effort and the performance that JoJo Diaz had against Tevin Farmer. This fight against Farmer was like January 2020. Tevin Farmer hasn't returned to the ring since. He's going to return at 135. He was supposed to fight Mickey Bay, and that was one of the biggest fiascos of the year. If you look up what happened on that fight card, they announced during the actual fight card that the main event wasn't taking place. And I don't even know if they announced it. I know that the fighters announced it on social media, but yeah, that was just a mess. But anyway, Tevin Farmer hasn't returned to the ring since losing his IBF 130-pound title. And then COVID hit after JoJo Diaz secured the belt, so JoJo Diaz didn't return to the ring himself until just over a year later, and it was against Shavkat Rakhimov. And in this fight, JoJo Diaz missed weight, so he lost his title on the scale. And then so he takes to the ring against Shavkat Rakhimov. Rakhimov fights in the UFC, but Shavkat Rakhimov, who was undefeated going into that fight against JoJo Diaz, and Rakhimov was the only person who could have won the title because, again, JoJo Diaz lost the belt on the scale. So this ended up being a super competitive fight. This was, again, Southpaw versus Southpaw, and it ended up being scored a majority draw. So nobody ended up winning this title. I don't think that this IBF 130-pound title was settled until, I think, Kenshin Ogawa beat Azinga Fuzili for the 130-pound title, and then Joe Cordina knocked out Ogawa for that belt. So, yeah, nobody came out of JoJo Diaz versus Rakhimov with the belt, but it was one hell of a fight if you get a chance to check that out. So, since that draw against Rakhimov, JoJo Diaz then went up to 135, fought Javier Fortuna, who at his best was at 126-pound featherweight. And I think that JoJo Diaz was at his best at featherweight as well. So this ended up being another super competitive fight. Both JoJo Diaz and Fortuna are pretty short for the division, for lightweight especially. I mean, we just saw that play out when Fortuna fought against Ryan Garcia, right? Fortuna looked like he needed to take an escalator to get close to Ryan Garcia. Well, JoJo Diaz, in a very close fight, ended up edging a unanimous decision win against Javier Fortuna. Fortuna, a very good fighter. So this was kind of seen as being like a near 50-50 fight, although JoJo Diaz was a slight betting favorite. I thought that Javier Fortuna might pull off a close decision win himself, but JoJo Diaz, in fact, won that fight. And then he fought Devin Haney in December of 2021. Devin Haney did Devin Haney-like things, kind of kept JoJo Diaz on the outside, kept the jab moving, kept his feet moving, just took good angles, pretty much smothered a lot of JoJo Diaz's punches, which JoJo Diaz, again, he's a short fighter. He has even shorter arms. And so JoJo Diaz throws a lot of straight punches, quick combinations. When he does throw hooks, they're not super wide hooks. Everything is pretty compact. But against Devin Haney, JoJo Diaz didn't get enough opportunities to really make this a super close fight. Devin Haney pretty much pulled away on the scorecards, like 9 rounds to 3, 8 rounds to 4. So that is JoJo Diaz's last fight. And now he's about to fight William Zepeda, who, man, you want to talk about a pressure fighter. William Zepeda averages 40 more punches per round than the lightweight average. Think about that. 40 more punches per round than the divisional average. William Zepeda, he's one of those physical anomalies just in his output. Not so much Emmanuel Navarrete-like, but Navarrete in his own regard is an anomaly in that you are not going to get another fighter who fights like Emmanuel Navarrete. With William Zepeda, first of all, out of his 26 wins, 23 have come via knockout or stoppage. That's an extremely high knockout ratio. So William Zepeda, he's got good power. He doesn't have one punch put your lights out power, but what he does have is just the punch volume plus, we'll say, B plus A minus level punching power. So he's got good power, really good power, but it's not like Ryan Garcia, Gervonta Davis like power. But because he throws so many punches and has like a really good chin, he just seems like he's willing to just kind of walk through everything. First of all, he's not a bad defensive fighter, and he's not just a brute. He's not just a brawler. He'll come in with kind of a high guard, and again, he's a southpaw. So he's throwing these like long, pretty straight punches, but he will throw a lot of hooks as well. And his right hand lead hook, devastating. And his left hand is very nice too. But the thing is, he is just punching all round long. He doesn't take very many breaks. So if you look at the fight that kind of put him on the map, it was against Hector Tanahara Jr. And Tanahara was actually the A-side fighter against William Zepeda. So this was billed as Tanahara against William Zepeda. And people were talking about, the sweet science of Tanahara. And these guys are both pretty tall for the division. This was like 5'10" versus 5'9", and they both have good reaches as well. So Tanahara hadn't been in the ring in over like a year. Like he was out of the ring for like a year and a half, and his first fight back was against William Zepeda. Well, it became very evident very early that Tanahata was having a lot of trouble with the pressure and the punch output of William Zepeda, and he just got overwhelmed to where, no, he didn't like get knocked out, but after the 6th round, Tanahata's trainer, the famed Robert Garcia, basically just said no more because of the beating that Tanahara was taking. Like this just looked like it was torture, just the overwhelming output, and it's all hard punches. Like Zepeda isn't like throwing like tap, tap, tap to then set up bigger punches. He's throwing just one big punch after another, and he's putting them together in combinations where I'm just scratching my head just trying to figure it out. I'm trying to think, man, who wouldn't have a difficult time against a guy like William Zepeda? Well, a few fights later, that question was answered. So after stopping Tanahata, he then just walked over Moralde from the Philippines, and then had a really awkward fight against Luis Viedas, and that was like Viedas kept on slipping in the corner and like hurting his knee, and it was just a weird fight. And William Zepeda, when he scored the final knockdown, he dropped Viedas, and then he hit Viedas once Viedas was on the ground, and the ref like didn't call foul, didn't take a point away. He just counted Viedas down, and the punch that Zepeda hit Viedas with after Viedas was on the canvas was like a body shot that he loaded up on. Like he got a free shot to the body once the guy was down, but it was ruled a knockout for William Zepeda. But then in his next fight, he fights Rene Alvarado, a former belt holder, a very good fighter, but he was a very good fighter in lower, smaller divisions. So then he's fighting Zepeda at lightweight, and Alvarado, through the course of 10 rounds, Alvarado is one of the 3 guys who went the distance against Zepeda. The other guys who went the distance when Zepeda was like fighting 6 rounders and 4 rounders. But Rene Alvarado went the distance, and this was such a close fight. They were just whacking each other, just back and forth. Alvarado actually backed William Zepeda up a few times. It looked like he kind of hurt Zepeda a couple times. Now, Zepeda obviously hurt Alvarado a couple times as well, and he looked like he was throwing the harder shots, Zepeda. Sometimes that's a lot of conjecture. I don't like it when people are scoring a fight assuming who's throwing the harder punches, because unless we see Alvarado go down or just totally back up into the ropes and cover up, we're pretty much only guessing that Zepeda is hitting him with the harder shots. But I also think we're factoring in Zepeda's track record and his knockout ratio. So it's maybe a safe assumption to make, but it's still an assumption. So this ended up being a super close fight. Put it like this: after 7 rounds on Chris Mannix's unofficial scorecard, he had Alvarado up 4 rounds to 3. And then you look at the scorecards when they started announcing it, all 3 judges had it in favor of William Zepeda, and they had it in favor of Zepeda like 8 rounds to 2, 7 rounds to 3, and 6 rounds to 4. It's just one of those where you see a very competitive fight that looks like it could be scored either way, and then they read the scores, and it's like, damn, what the hell was that? And I think that was on the Zordo Ramirez. That was Gilberto Ramirez's last fight. It was in Ontario, California. This was on the undercard of that. But yeah, the judges' scorecards didn't reflect how close Zepeda versus Rene Alvarado was. But Zepeda won another fight, and now he's about to fight JoJo Diaz. So I look at this as being a fight where, as relentless as the attack of William Zepeda is, and as many hard punches as he's throwing, and just his opponent's inability to even cope with it. Like, you see him breaking their spirits round after round, exchange after exchange, where they're just looking like, what the hell? What the hell is up with this guy? Like, if you watch the fight like Zepeda versus Moralde just looks so discouraged by like the end of the 1st or 2nd round. It ended up being like a 4th round knockout, and I think Moralde just turned away by the end of it, just turned away, and the ref just jumped in. It was just unbearable. And so with Zepeda's attack, and the fact that he's fighting somebody in JoJo Diaz who hasn't exhibited knockout power, since he was really, he's got like a couple stoppages at 130, like against Freddie Fonseca, which that's actually his last knockout win. That was back in May of 2019. Before that, you would have to go all the way back to before he fought Gary Russell Jr. So this is when he was at 126. He scored a knockout of Victor Terrazas. But this was back in like 2018, early 2018. So since February of 2018, JoJo Diaz has one stoppage. He has only one stoppage at 130 and no stoppages since he's been at 135. So his punching power has kind of diminished as he's gone up in weight. Here he's fighting a guy who, again, he's stopping almost all of his opponents. So I don't expect JoJo Diaz to stop William Zepeda. The question is JoJo Diaz gritty enough, experienced enough, technical enough, quick enough to outbox William Zepeda over the course of 12 rounds? I think he's going to make this one very interesting. I think he's going to find a home for his straight left hand and for his lead right. I think he's going to be hitting Zepeda cleanly. He might have a slight, he being JoJo Diaz, might have a slight hand speed advantage. But, you know, William Zepeda is throwing so many punches per round and just seems so undeterred. Even when he's getting landed cleanly upon, he's just throwing punches back. So I think that this is going to be like a phone booth style fight. I just don't see this playing out any other way. Like, JoJo Diaz isn't the type to run. William Zepeda sure as hell isn't the type to run. So, I mean, something's got to give here. But I think what we're going to get is, because of JoJo Diaz's durability, I think we're going to get 12 rounds of like all-out action where I don't think that William Zepeda, as his opponent quality gets better and better, obviously that knockout ratio, it's going to go down. Like, we see this all the time. Like, look at Edgar Berlanga's first, 16 fights, all by knockout. And then, like, the next 3 or so fights after that, all wins via decision. But that's not the only case. You see a lot of knockout artists whose knockout ratio starts to taper off as they start fighting better and better fighters. Well, JoJo Diaz is a huge step up in opponent quality for William Zepeda. So I know that JoJo Diaz is going to be the best guy Zepeda has fought. Zepeda is not the best guy that JoJo Diaz has fought against. JoJo Diaz has fought Devin Haney, Gary Russell Jr. I mean, Tevin Farmer, you could argue, is at least on par maybe with William Zepeda. But I've got, and Shavkat Rakhimov, very good fighter as well. He's about to fight for the vacant 130-pound belt because Joe Cordina got hurt in the lead up to Cordina versus Rakhimov. So Zelfa Barrett's going to step in, and yeah, the IBF stripped Joe Cordina because Joe Cordina got hurt in training, which I didn't agree with. You see, you know, guys hold on to belts, you know, and they're able to fight later on if they get injured while being a belt holder. So I didn't like that. But yeah, Shavkat Rakhimov's about to fight for a 130-pound title in his next fight. But yeah, JoJo Diaz has fought better fighters than William Zepeda. But I don't know if he's fought guys as dangerous as William Zepeda, just in terms of having that relentless, astounding level of pressure. But I do think that he's got enough tools, he being JoJo Diaz, enough tools to make this a very competitive fight. I just think that at the end of the day, especially in the second half of the fight, even though, you know, Zepeda's only gone the 10-round distance once, JoJo Diaz has gone, you know, the 12-round distance in each of his last 5 fights. They all went the 12-round distance. So, you know, I mean, that's almost making me kind of rethink this. Who's going to have the better second half of the fight? Like, let's assume that the first half of the fight is somewhat even. And again, that's assuming that JoJo Diaz is going to be able to weather the storm, handle the onslaught, and do enough hitting of his own to kind of back Zepeda up and to at least make this kind of a tit-for-tat type of fight, action fight, but a tit-for-tat fight as opposed to, you know, the Zepeda activity and the punch output being one-way traffic, which ends up being the case, if not in the beginning of a Zepeda fight, certainly by the time he's finishing his opponent. It's just them trying to like run for cover, like, damn, what can I do to this guy? Well, I think JoJo Diaz has enough tools to know what to do with this guy. I just think that it's going to be slightly not enough. I think that Zepeda is actually going to be rewarded a close, I'm talking like maybe 7 rounds to 5, like decision win. Like, this one might even be controversial. I wouldn't be totally surprised if this one actually ends up a draw. That's how much respect I have for JoJo Diaz's abilities and his durability. I think that JoJo Diaz has a very good chin. No, he's not the hardest puncher at 135, but I do think that he's going to be able to take what Zepeda has to give. Like, if Zepeda knocks JoJo Diaz out or stops JoJo Diaz, that would be a huge accomplishment for Zepeda. Nobody stopped JoJo Diaz to date. His only 2 losses, again, came via decision. And you'd have to look long and hard to try to find an instance of JoJo Diaz being noticeably hurt. Like, I'd have to, nothing's coming to mind off the top of my head where JoJo Diaz looked like he was about to get stopped or in big, big trouble. I've seen him get outboxed by A-level boxers, but Zepeda is a good boxer. Again, he keeps a pretty high guard. He even moves his head a little bit, but he's coming in so hot and heavy that he is there to get hit. And I think JoJo Diaz, with his nice, crisp, short, and quick punches, is going to be able to hit Zepeda a lot. I just think Zepeda is going to be able to hit JoJo Diaz a little bit more, and I think he's going to be awarded. Because if a round is a swing round, I'm just going to assume that they're going to give Zepeda the super close rounds because he is like he's the prospect that they're trying to build into a contender. JoJo Diaz, even though he's only 29, I don't see him fighting for too much longer. He's looking for a few big paydays, I believe. Like, I don't even think he really should be at 135. He should probably still be at 130, but they're bigger payday opportunities at 135. Ryan Garcia being one of them, even though Ryan Garcia looks like he's going to be moving to 140, if not now, then very soon. Like, he's fought his last 2 fights that were one of the 2 was supposed to be at 135, but they renegotiated, and Ryan Garcia ended up, weighing in at 140 or close to it. So, but JoJo Diaz is looking for bigger paydays. I don't think that he's going to get the love on a fight that might look like it's an even fight or even look like JoJo Diaz might have done enough to edge it. I think Zepeda is going to win a split decision over JoJo Diaz. But yeah, let me know what you think about JoJo Diaz versus William Zepeda. This one's going to be a banger. Like, I don't see anybody giving too much ground here, just style-wise. This, to me, is going to be a must-watch. And, before the fight against Alvarado, I would have probably picked Zepeda by either a wider margin or maybe even a stoppage over JoJo Diaz. But again, that one was razor close where it looked to my eyes like it could have gone either way. But since I've seen that fight, I think it's going to be a very close fight between JoJo Diaz and William Zepeda. I would be pretty surprised at a stoppage either way. Even though Zepeda's got this crazy knockout ratio, JoJo Diaz just isn't the one. But if Zepeda is able to pull off the knockout, again, hats off to him. But I'm going to go Zepeda via close split decision. And this one, again, might even be a draw, but I'll go with Zepeda via split decision. Please let me know your thoughts on this fight in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.